The Baltic is not a sea, it is my lake, a Swedish lake. In this episode, you'll see how I built a powerful Swedish economy in 4 steps, allowing me to field a professional army capable of achieving this goal. In the first episode, I started with nothing. Today you'll see a monster. Welcome imperialists, Lucas here. I'll start by saying that the next few years of my Sweden campaign will be dedicated to consolidation and urbanization. By consolidation, I mean that I'll now be annexing my Danish vassals one by one, because this area will soon become my granary. There's simply an enormous amount of grain here. In the future, I'll also establish a governor here to increase control across the entire region. By urbanization, I mean that I'll have to build at least one town in every single province. After that, I'll construct the granary building up to its maximum level. Then I'll grant it the granary town city right, or staple port in the case of coastal towns. Of course, I'm prioritizing coastal towns so Sweden can build an even stronger navy. This should significantly improve both the spread of proximity and the increase of control. However, this won't just be a period of construction, I'll also be fighting wars, to acquire workers as well as foreign investors, who may not be happy about it but will still contribute funds to Sweden's development. At the same time, my diplomacy will focus on improving relations with countries deeper into Europe rather than those on the Baltic coast. Unfortunately, as a pagan nation, I am hated by pretty much every country by default. That makes it very easy for them to form coalitions against me. I'll especially have to keep an eye on major powers like France, Bohemia and Poland. And I'll be honest, without serfdom, Sweden can't rely on levies. I'll have to depend on a professional army or mercenaries. I'll also test whether going for heavy infantry is actually worth it. After all, Sweden has bonuses for them, and later technological advancements also favor heavy infantry. But you can't field a powerful professional army without a powerful economy, so that's what I'll be focusing on. Fortunately, my economy isn't in such bad shape, because once I improve my legitimacy, I will immediately jump to around 70 income. More importantly, I've unlocked government bonds in banking, which are incredible for rapidly developing your country. They let you borrow larger amounts at lower interest rates than regular loans. It would be even better if I had a higher credit rating. I've tested that already though, and it's pretty difficult to keep it at a high level. The money from the bonds goes first and foremost into increasing my trade capacity. After all, I have plenty of tools and other goods to sell. Trade becomes more important with every passing year, especially from the 4th era onward. And that's despite the fact that I'm currently having problems with my crown. That's because my ruler unfortunately died and her son is actually the first representative of the new dynasty. Fortunately, it'll recover very quickly. I also have to admit that in the first episode I completely forgot about this action that was added in the new patch. It basically lets you collect free money from the burghers. From now on, I'll be doing it every 5 years, since that's the cooldown. From what I've noticed, the amount doesn't depend on your income, but on how much money the burgher estate has accumulated. Although I could be wrong, I haven't tested it thoroughly yet, so let me know in the comments. Once your support is high enough, it's also worth raising the maximum taxes for that year from time to time. Unfortunately, it's only 5% and only for one estate at a time. A shame, I wish I could squeeze more money out of everyone. Fortunately, you'll find better percentage bonuses on ENEBA. You'll find the current offer in the description along with the links you need to click for the promotion to work. I recommend buying games on ENEBA, Lucas. I'm also making sure that I have all the buildings that increase demand. That means libraries, temples, bridges and every other type of utility building. In other words, the ones that provide bonuses rather than producing goods. In locations with very valuable resources such as horses or wool that aren't towns, I'm building bailiffs. That gives me really solid control in those locations, because a bailiff permanently provides a flat plus 20% control. I'm also preparing for another invasion of England because most of my voluntary workers have already turned into peasants and I need more. The money will come in handy too. After all these building upgrades, you really need to pay attention to what resources they consume the most, because the maintenance costs have changed. They're no longer a flat 20%. Those costs increase as the game progresses. That means using your buildings efficiently becomes even more important over time than it used to be, especially when the prices of the goods they consume start drifting far away from the average. That's where the 4th silver ducat comes into play. On the other hand, you also don't want commodity prices to completely collapse, because instead of growing, your tax base will start shrinking. Honestly, this change is incredibly annoying and I don't like it, especially because it makes serfdom even more important than before, since it now affects building maintenance. I'm also beginning to expand my industrial heartland, the entire region with iron and copper, where control is already fairly strong. I'm building tool workshops everywhere in this area, and whenever theaters become available, I highly recommend building them as soon as possible, they massively increase demand for those goods, and they are also incredibly cheap to construct. On top of that, they increase cultural tradition and reduce unrest across your country, meaning fewer rebellions. And thanks to all of that, I've increased my income from 40 to 104, which will make paying off those bonds much easier. The maximum amount I can borrow has also increased. Now that the treasury is finally filling up, it's time for another invasion of England. Yeah, I know, I definitely haven't been doing enough raiding lately. Oh well, this time I'm going to deal with England's allies first. And I don't know whether something changed or if it's some special ability of my army, but all of a sudden I can march through territory where I don't even have military access. Very interesting. England starts losing ships once again. Meanwhile, my vassals are taking care of England's vassals' landings and I'm bringing capital back home from Germany. Beautiful! New workers, and I don't even have to pay them yet, they don't collect welfare either. I also really like this quality of life change where a country's vassals are grouped underneath it. Although I think that might have already been in the previous patch. Either way, it's definitely an improvement. From England's allies, I take their money, demolish all of their forts so they're easier to invade next time, and that's all I really want. Rather than dragging the war out, I settle for another 200,000 population, take a mountain of English gold, and leave with every intention of coming back in a few years. That brings us to 1437, where it's time to choose an Age of Discovery idea path. The diplomatic path offers two incredibly valuable bonuses: increased trade range and lower trade costs. Meanwhile, the administrative path boosts both copper and iron production while also giving a solid bonus to trade capacity. Honestly, this was a tough decision. I'm really not sure which one is stronger. The last time I played Portugal, I went all in on the diplomatic route, and the trade benefits were definitely noticeable. So this time, I'm going with the administrative path instead. Let me know in the comments which route you chose and how your results compare to mine. More importantly though, I've been waiting for this age to begin, because it unlocks mining communities and I think they've been nerfed quite a bit. Even so, for a country like Sweden, they're still one of the strongest choices. I honestly wish I were playing a serfdom build, because they'd be even better. I've been waiting for this. It lets me upgrade all of my timber producing RGOs for a fraction of the normal cost. And the best part is that there's another bonus just like it, and they stack. So I don't even hesitate, I issue another round of government bonds and push this decision through Parliament. With both bonuses active, all I have to do is filter for the appropriate RGOs, and I spend practically every coin I have on them. The base cost drops from 100 gold to just 57. That saves an incredible amount of money on expansion. Right after that, I officially become a great power. Which means it's finally time to deal with Norway. The war went by so quickly that it honestly wasn't even worth showing. In fact, it was so fast that I immediately turned my attention to the Teutonic Order and its vassals, picking up some more workers along the way. And while I'm at it, maybe I'll take Danzig in this war. I took a foothold in Danzig, grabbed a huge pile of money and demolished their forts. Honestly, I wasn't even planning to conquer Danzig yet, it just worked out that way. The most frustrating part is that I was incredibly close to conquering all of Norway. Oh well, they can keep their tiny little patch of land. Oh, looks like a coalition might be forming. Guess I'll have to slow things down for a while. During one of the parliamentary sessions, I also changed my government preference to the wealthy. I noticed that the tax pool I can draw from the burghers has started to surpass the one from the peasants. You can really see it in the mining towns. That's why I'm no longer convinced that turning these provinces into mining towns is actually the best strategy. I think combining bailiffs with a stronger focus on taxing the peasantry might end up being more effective. Around this time, a new ruler also takes the throne, and I discovered that my little advisor trick unfortunately doesn't work anymore. As soon as this woman became queen, she automatically stopped being my advisor. That's a shame. It used to be a really good way to keep advisors who supported the crown. With that out of the way, it's time for yet another invasion of England. As always, I sink the English fleet, and as always, I deal with the allies first. Once again, I bring tens of thousands of workers back to Sweden. More importantly though, this time I also bring home a huge amount of foreign capital, in the form of investments. While all these wars were going on, I also founded a large number of new towns. Stockholm finally becomes a city. Once again, I catch up on all the utility buildings, starting with the port infrastructure to increase port capacity. Naturally, that also increases demand for all the associated goods. I'm not sure there's much point listing every single building every time. It's always the same types of utility buildings, ones that provide bonuses instead of producing goods. Only now did I notice one of the biggest changes to the technology system. Paradox added a fourth technology branch to every age, just like the second age already had. That means there's always something meaningful to research now. I think that's a great change. As soon as I reach the third age, my first priority is getting the construction center. It lets you construct one additional building at the same time. After that, I'll unlock another government reform. Then more RGOs, because that's what Sweden is built around. And while I'm here, I'll also grab an extra governor. I won't need improved merchants just yet. I'll worry about those later. Right now, urban rights are much more important. I also discovered a neat little trick for rapidly increasing your credit rating. I take out one government bond. Then I take out a regular loan and immediately pay it back. Take another loan, pay it back. Repeat. Your credit rating climbs incredibly fast, and your interest rates can drop by almost half. Unfortunately, your credit rating also falls just as quickly afterward, so I'm not convinced it's actually worth doing. I can finally build the new armories as well, and I'm already working on modernizing my army. Which means it's finally time for the next phase of the campaign, the conquest of Prussia and Livonia. This stage begins with finishing the conquest of Norway. My real objective, however, is taking more territory from the Teutonic Order. In the meantime, I've managed to increase my tax base, but I won't lie, I'm having a hard time growing my income any further. Costs are rising much faster now than they did in previous versions of the game. That said, I've been keeping those costs under control by maintaining fairly stable commodity prices. Getting back to the war though, it looks like the old issue with automatic naval transport is back. Even after ordering my fleet to transport troops, it just sits in port doing absolutely nothing. So once again, I have to move my entire army manually. Despite that, the first major battle finally takes place. Even though my enemies are fielding much larger armies this time, I still completely crush them. After that battle, I can safely split my forces up. The saddest part about this war is that if the Teutonic Order had actually linked up with the Livonian Order, I probably would have lost the war, or at the very least taken massive casualties. But they never combined their armies, which makes this war surprisingly easy. One change that I really like though is that the army interface now clearly shows what each army is made up of. You can instantly see how much of it consists of levies, how much is regular troops, and of course how many mercenaries are included. I finish off the Livonian Order's army first, then it's time to deal with the Teutonic Order. That's actually pretty strange, because in the previous episode I had the impression that the AI was much better at grouping its forces together into large armies that actually posed a challenge. From the Order, I take another region to connect with Danzig, demolish a whole bunch of their forts, and demand war reparations. As for Norway, I finish conquering the country completely, which also gives me control over all of their former vassals. I also changed Danzig's status from a fiefdom to a dominion. Yes, that means I won't be integrating them for another 50 years. I'd actually rather keep them around for quite a while and let them continue developing the region themselves. Right after the war with the Order, I got hit by a noble rebellion. It wasn't particularly strong, just annoying as always. Unfortunately, after bringing so many workers home from my recent wars, I lost core status in several of my heartland provinces. That reduced control there by 20%. And that's really not cool. On one hand, I think it's a pretty silly mechanic. Why should a fully integrated province suddenly lose control? On the other hand, I suppose it does represent the real challenges of dealing with a massive influx of immigrants. In this case, it's even worse because they're slaves, and I can't change their culture. Specifically, I can't convert the Danish or Cornish culture. The game literally says I can't change their culture. So now I have to wait until those slave populations gradually become peasants. Only then will I be able to convert their culture. I also released Norway as my fiefdom, which significantly improved my income. My relations with the Norwegians are excellent, so I'd like to annex both of those vassals as soon as possible. Especially since Oslo has the potential to become another excellent control hub. For my next government reform, I'd like to pick the one that boosts offensive capability and improves siege effectiveness. There are some incredibly strong economic reforms available as well, but they all require serfdom, and they're honestly very powerful. For now, I'm focusing on expanding my merchant fleet. My goal is to reach 40 of those ships, because they provide an incredible boost to maritime presence. Unfortunately, by this stage of the game, the AI also starts building heavy ships, which means I have to start building them too. As for military ideas, I've decided to go with the offensive and quantity paths for Sweden. Quantity ideas let you field more troops on the front line, which basically means you deal more damage than your opponent right from the beginning of every battle. When it comes to the quality path, I just don't see enough value there. There aren't any standout bonuses that really justify taking it. It's missing things like discipline and stronger tactical bonuses. I also established the northern market, which will let me generate much more income from this region. Right now, control here is absolutely terrible. But I'm already working on expanding the local town and building a governor there. In the end though, I still think I've come out well ahead when it comes to overall control. Before the next war, I recruited 4,000 heavy infantry to serve as the backbone of my army. After all, Sweden gets bonuses for them. Before that though, I need to increase my manpower significantly. Anyway, using the religious casus belli, I demand the return of Koslin, while also preparing to finally attack Novgorod. Unfortunately, I don't have artillery yet, so this is going to be another long war, where I'm still relying on levies, supported by my heavy infantry. And once again, I have to transport my entire army manually. I had a feeling it would come back to bite me that I never demolished the Livonian Order's forts. Sure enough, they've already built even more of them. In the meantime, I'm also constructing a whole bunch of new armories. I finally unlocked urban rights as well, and I don't think it'll surprise anyone when I say I'm combining Sweden's unique urban right that boosts tool production with the standard age urban right. That was a huge boost to my income. Back to the war, these forts fell much faster than I expected. I even had enough time to march my army toward Danzig, where I fought a battle to defend it. From what I can tell though, I didn't come out of that fight without taking some serious losses. Maybe that's because I somehow managed to lose track of my heavy infantry. The casualties were so severe that I actually had to hire mercenaries. Then, right at the very end of the war, just as I was about to secure a complete victory, Poland declared war on the order. So I had to take the territory I needed sooner than I wanted, less than I could have taken too, because I still have to be careful about aggressive expansion. As always, every newly conquered province goes to Danzig. Hopefully Poland doesn't conquer too much. I'm really counting on having more room to expand here myself. Otherwise, I'm eventually going to have to fight Poland. And wow, Poland is ridiculously strong. Either I've forgotten how to play this game, or they seriously improved the AI, because Sweden and Poland now have almost identical tax bases. With all the money I looted, I upgrade my towns into cities. For one simple reason, cities can have 2 city privileges, and I really want that 40% tool production bonus. Although I do make one exception. In the provinces where I'm mining copper, I choose the weapon production privilege instead. Copper is a key component in most weapons anyway, and you simply don't need nearly as many weapons. Unfortunately for me, the Teutonic Order got beaten so badly by Poland that it lost all of its vassals. That's a shame, I was hoping to inherit them for free. Even worse, they're all Catholic states. That definitely complicates things going forward. Especially because just a few years later, another gigantic Catholic nation appeared in the region. Honestly, I have no idea what this is. At least part of the Livonian Order ended up becoming a Teutonic vassal again. So of course I wasn't going to let that opportunity go to waste. By now I have assembled a small professional army with the proper unit composition to activate the bonus. And as usual, I used threat and war to demand a province and open the door for conquering even more territory. This time though, I'm using nothing but my professional army. If necessary, I'll reinforce it with mercenaries. And honestly, the composition performs reasonably well, but it isn't exactly amazing. Figuring out optimal army compositions was a lot easier in EU4, so once again I end up hiring mercenaries. After a quick victory, I immediately attacked the Teutonic Order. The only real problem was capturing those last 2 provinces. Because of that, I ended up spending hundreds of gold improving relations with Halych, whose borders are rather unusual. Then, 1 year later, it turned out I didn't need to do any of that. Minsk ended its war with the Order, with a white peace no less. To make matters worse, I still had to hand over 2 provinces to Minsk just to make the Teutonic Order disappear from the map. On the bright side, the entire coastline from Prussia to Livonia now belongs to me. Which means the easy part of my conquest is finally over. The next stage will be much more difficult. Conquering the coastline that's part of the Holy Roman Empire is going to be a completely different challenge. Taking a single province there can generate as much as 100 aggressive expansion. So before I move in, I'll need an army that's strong enough to deal with the coalition that follows. And honestly, it's probably about time I invaded Poland as well. That's exactly what I'll be doing in the next stage of the campaign, the industrialization of Sweden. Because let's face it, it's always better to build your country using someone else's money. At the very beginning, I got an event that revealed silver deposits. All in all, it's a pretty good trade, wood for silver. And on top of that, it's 14 levels. Now I'm focusing on upgrading all of my towns in this region into cities. It's possible because my income is already quite strong. In each of these cities, I'm building the highest possible levels of tool production. And that comes with a certain consequence. I need more and more iron on the market. I do have a few iron RGOs, but they're low level. Sweden's real strength lies in the fact that it can build a huge number of bog iron smelters on wetlands. And each one of them produces iron for us. Even if Sweden itself runs out of iron, we still have other territories. Most importantly, RGO efficiency is affected by the traditional economy, but bog iron smelters efficiency is not. For that, we need the capitalist economy. Bog iron smelters, in turn, require large amounts of coal to operate. Coal, or more precisely charcoal, is produced in this building from wood. Sweden certainly has enormous amounts of wood that can be harvested from RGOs, but at this point it's far more efficient to obtain it from lumber mills. However, lumber mills require tools to produce wood. As you can see, connecting these four buildings creates a closed-loop, self-sustaining economy. So over the next several years, my economic development will revolve around constructing these four buildings. In 1517, Lutheranism appeared, and this event gave me the option to convert to that religion. However, I decided to reject the offer. And so I played until 1537, when the Age of Reformation began. I'd love to say that this was finally the era where I picked the military idea group. But instead, I chose the diplomatic progression because it's simply the strongest. It provides the largest number of trade bonuses, and from this era onward, trade becomes increasingly important. I deliberately passed up the bonus to mint my own currency, in favor of a 5% bonus to all income, along with the most important trade modifier of all, reduced trading costs outside of trade range. Trade capacity is also something you should always prioritize, because it makes your trade buildings even more efficient. Unfortunately, I still have a huge amount of research to catch up on from the previous era, because I made one massive mistake. I unlocked institutional adoption through the cabinet action far too late. It's an incredibly important action, because it speeds up the spread of every institution. I have to admit I'd gotten out of the habit because on the previous patch, institutions spread extremely quickly on their own. That's no longer the case on this patch. Still, more than 30 years of economic development have passed. Many cities have been established, the population has grown dramatically, and control over most of my territory has also increased significantly. However, the wild north still remains to be tamed, and that's what I'm starting to work on now. When it comes to research, my highest priorities are unlocking level 2 workshops, along with every bonus to wood and iron production. It's obvious that my biggest trading profits come from selling cheap tools and weapons, while at the same time importing large quantities of valuable goods. From this point onward, I also begin shifting from the traditional economy toward the capitalist economy. That means I'm adopting every privilege that provides bonuses to the capitalist economy. At the same time, I'll be removing all the privileges that boost the traditional economy. That also means passing new laws and changing employment methods to the most profitable ones. Of course, this comes at a significant stability cost. Meanwhile, I also conquered the last few Novgorodian provinces that I'd previously missed, leaving me free to prepare for an invasion of the Holy Roman Empire. That won't be easy, especially since Poland has declared me a rival and formed alliances with numerous imperial states. And because Poland is both economically and militarily powerful, it's a serious obstacle. Meanwhile, as you can see, many of my cities have become wealthy and they now generate the majority of my income. The only village that still makes me money is Sala. It would be difficult to show everything I have in each individual province, so instead I'm showing you the complete list of buildings I've constructed up to this point. Damn, I forgot about universities. Even so, I still wouldn't say my current income is high enough to support a large army, because as you can see, it isn't. I'm still focused on reaching 1000 net income, because that's the point where you finally have enough money to start investing in other things. For example, even now I still don't think I can afford to build roads everywhere. Most of those roads have been built by the burghers, but I still have to fill in the gaps myself. I'm also working on the next stage of urbanization. For now, I'm building a large number of towns, but importantly, I'm deliberately avoiding any areas that produce high-quality food, such as cattle or grain. Those areas I leave untouched. After running my own tests, I also decided against creating another market for the industrial region, specifically because of food. There's simply no efficient way to produce enough of it there. So I've accepted that these regions will have lower market access and operate somewhat less efficiently. But in return, I don't have to sacrifice trade capacity or spend hundreds of gold maintaining the food supply in that market. Several years later, I doubled the size of my army because the time had come to fight some more interesting wars. And I intend to use this army against Poland, while ordering my vassals not to participate in the war for now. In fact, I don't want them anywhere near it. I'll focus on wearing the enemy down and destroying their armies myself. Because to be honest, my main objective is to secure those incredible funds and loot Poland. Wow, I'm getting a siege tick practically every 7 days. But the real reason I captured this fortress was to use it as bait. AI armies very often come to retake their own territory. Although my army has proven to be much less effective than I'd hoped, Paradox has definitely changed something again. It wasn't until later, when I was mostly fighting levies, that I started inflicting much heavier casualties on the enemy. Even so, to conserve manpower, I hired some mercenary armies, which unfortunately isn't particularly cost-effective. But after destroying the large armies of over 40,000 troops, I started hunting down smaller regiments of just a few thousand men, and that's where my army really began to shine. It was able to crush the enemy with little trouble. Oh, and I didn't show this earlier, but I have the option to sell captured troops into slavery. Although I'm not entirely sure whether they go directly to me or end up in the Krakow market instead. And after less than a year, I walk away with over 5,000 gold, war reparations, and a bit of territory. I won't lie though, that war completely drained me, which means I need to rethink my army composition because this one just isn't performing well. On patch 1.2, balanced armies worked great, but now I'd say they're pretty underwhelming. Still, thanks to Poland, I gained the capital needed to expand the new towns and cities I'd recently founded. In the meantime, I also researched burgher rights, allowing me to tax them more heavily. And since I now have new cities, I need to grant them urban rights. Honestly, I'd rather spend money on that than legitimacy. Because the later you get into the game, the harder it becomes to recover it. The next country I attacked was Muscovy. Mainly because I wanted to test the old army composition again, full cavalry, and in short, cavalry is overpowered once again. Levy stacks melt away like hotcakes. Thanks to that, in less than half a year, I wiped out more than 200,000 Muscovite levies. At that point, the country essentially no longer has an army. Meanwhile, my second army, which now consists primarily of heavy infantry, moved in to conduct the sieges. After crushing the Muscovite armies, I sent my cavalry to capture additional regional capitals. Since these were densely populated areas, I gained plenty of workers. Meanwhile, my second army rapidly captured every fortress, on the road to Moscow because I wanted to sack it and seize all of its works of art. Oh no, they capitulated, which means I won't get neither the workers or the works of art. But I will receive 2,000 gold and conquer a fairly large stretch of territory. I'll also take over the Novgorod market. I also unlocked Sweden's unique coinage law, increasing my minting income by 20%. And like an idiot, I didn't pass it through parliament, so yes, it cost me 70 stability. At least the law had a very positive impact on copper prices. By looting my neighbors and continuing to expand the economy, I eventually reached the year 1584. My tax base had grown to nearly 4,000, but I can't really say that translated into higher revenue. The costs of maintaining my army and buildings consume virtually all of my income. The army is expensive because I have only just modernized it. And I still have to unlock tier 2 for all manufactories. Still, the goal was to build an economy capable of supporting a large professional army. And I achieved that. Now all that's left is to prove that Sweden is a true empire, with a lake of its own. I begin with a war against Poland, which unfortunately is once again allied with Bohemia. That means I'm facing a very tough opponent. Although, as usual, I wasn't paying attention and have to wait another 2 years to fabricate a casus belli. I used those 2 years to expand my armies into this composition. As it turned out, this composition is actually too large for this era because I'm paying additional food maintenance costs. Because of that, I achieved my third hegemon status, as I now have the economic, military and cultural hegemonies. With everything prepared, I declare war on Poland. Although, to be honest, my real target in this war is Bohemia, which, as you saw, has once again allied itself with Poland. But first, I need to wear down the Bohemian armies. For my professional armies, levy armies aren't much of a challenge. And they just keep crushing them battle after battle. It's incredible. Even after I had inflicted 500,000 casualties on the enemy, they were still able to field fairly large professional armies. That's why I decided to make a drastic move. I simply marched straight for the Bohemian capital, intending to sack it and end the war as quickly as possible. Fortunately, Bohemia doesn't have many fortresses, although unfortunately they still take a very long time to siege down. Along the way, other countries joined the war, but they paid for it with their territory. I really like the fact that I can sell captured mercenaries on the open market, which only strengthens my economy. Unfortunately, I'm forced to take Bohemia out of the war with a white peace because they've hired too many mercenaries. And I simply can't break through. At this point, Poland no longer stands any chance. As for the population I'm acquiring, I came up with a pretty interesting solution. In the capital of each of my markets, I built a single center, so that newly acquired population is sent there first and then distributed across the market wherever it's needed. Unfortunately, just as my armies arrived in Krakow and began the siege, Poland capitulated. How am I supposed to loot these countries? Well, at least some money still ends up in my treasury. Now I'm improving relations with all the larger principalities within the Holy Roman Empire, because I want to prevent a more dangerous coalition from forming. In the meantime, I also unlocked tier 2 buildings, and as you can see, buildings all across Sweden are now ready to be upgraded. I'll start with my industrial region, where every city benefits from those bonuses. I also researched an upgrade for my army that increases the mixed army bonus to nearly 20%. On the previous patch, that 20% bonus absolutely crushed the opposition. I'm curious to see how it performs on this one. So the only thing left to do is test it in battle, which leads to a rather large war. This time, however, I call in my ally, France. It has a huge number of fortifications that I intend to take advantage of, although it looks like France might actually be useful this time. I really need to play a campaign as them one of these days. In the threatened war casus belli, the most important thing is to capture the target area as quickly as possible, so that your war score starts ticking up. Fortunately, even though it's a difficult war, after just 1 year I'm able to force quite a few countries out of it. Although the list of enemies keeps growing with each passing month. Once I managed to knock Bohemia out of the war, the remaining opponents became much easier to deal with, including Austria. As a result of this war, I conquered a considerable amount of territory, which meant I was facing a massive coalition. But that's actually a good thing because it means I'll be able to conquer all of my enemies at once. Another advantage is that many countries are now paying me substantial tribute. A few years later, when I was about to take advantage of the coalition that had formed against me to conquer the rest of the coastline, it turned out that a religious war had broken out within the empire. Virtually all of Central Europe is fighting, along with Muscovy. Personally, I'm standing on the sidelines watching my enemies bleed each other dry. I plan to attack as soon as the conflict is over. And I have to admit, EU5's optimization has improved tremendously. It's genuinely satisfying to watch the troop numbers of my potential enemies shrink so quickly. I also got an event for the Swedish military reforms, which grants me some small bonuses. They were better in EU4. Just as I was about to attack, another massive plague broke out. So far it has killed around 2 million of my population. There had been plagues before, but they usually claimed at most a few tens of thousands of people. After the end of the religious war, Central Europe is simply devastated. Not only have they already lost tens of thousands of soldiers in the war, but now they're also losing population to the plague. Although in this particular outbreak, I am actually one of the countries hit the hardest. Unfortunately, those two events completely derailed my plans for a major war. The current one is much smaller. At least I'll recover some population. My armies had no trouble winning battles, and by the time I launched the second war, even Austria was no longer a challenge. In the end, I decided to prolong the war because I was still waiting for a third casus belli, which would allow me to secure the entire coastline. Poland made things even easier by attacking Austria, from whom I was simply extracting huge amounts of money. I think Poland ended up conquering about half of Austria. Oh, it turns out you can now dismantle the Hanseatic League. I don't think that was possible before. But my main objective is to take over the market, so I'm keeping it for myself. And as soon as all of my previous wars are over, I immediately start another one. My list of friends just keeps growing. In the end, it wasn't nearly as bad as I'd expected because the countries whose relations had improved never joined the coalition, so I'm only facing a bunch of minor states. And finally, in the year 1622, I conquered the entire Baltic coastline. All that remained was to put the cherry on top and form the Scandinavian Empire. In this case, forming Scandinavia grants us several unique technologies, so it's definitely worth doing. Oh right, I still have to form the empire separately, which I do as well. I have to say, this is definitely one of the most satisfying map labels I've managed to create in any of my recent campaigns. I also managed to significantly improve control across the entirety of Sweden. Although I'd happily release vassals in parts of Finland and northern Norway, of course I couldn't do that before forming Scandinavia. Control in those regions will also become very good in the future. And I also have to admit that I've come to appreciate just how important the capitalist economy has become, once I fully embraced it through events and parliamentary actions that increased it to the maximum. My economy really started to thrive. After the latest patch, trade has become even more important than before. So in the end, this is what my country's reforms look like. Let me know in the comments what strategy you used for Scandinavia, what you managed to achieve, and how different it was from what I did in this first episode. As for me, I'll soon start preparing an opening strategy for France.